Welcome to Behind the Debut, a podcast to shine a light on first-time authors and their journeys to publication. I'm your host, Michelle Reeves, a traditionally and self-published author myself, and in each episode we'll dive into the experiences of debut writers, how they got started, the challenges they faced, and what it really takes to bring a first book into the world. While most podcast airtime is reserved for best-selling authors, this is a space for new voices, authors who might not otherwise have the chance to share their story. In today's episode, I'm delighted to welcome Christine, also known as C.W. Rose, the author of Ocean Song. Hi Christine, welcome to Behind the Debut. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Can you start off by introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about your first book and what inspired you to write it?
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me on today. I'm C.W. Rose, fantasy and romance author by night, and healthcare professional by day, and I write about ordinary Asian women who find themselves in extraordinary circumstances and find themselves, and sometimes, usually, love on the way, and these cinnamon roll men who adore them. My first and only book for now is Ocean Song, a contemporary romantasy. That is an Asian Romeo and Juliet meets The Little Mermaid, but set in the grittiness of the real world. It was inspired by my love for the sea and all of her creatures, and from wondering what mysteries lay beneath the sea. Because what if merfolk were real, and were hiding among us all this time? After all, the sea is the least explored place on Earth.
I love that. And you're so right, because it's those what ifs that really tend to inspire us as authors, I think. So, when you started writing Ocean Song, did you plan it extensively, or are you a bit more of a pantser when it comes to writing, just winging it?
So I am 100% a plotter, though I can be a pantser partway through drafting. When I first start planning, scenes come to my head out of order, and I write them all down on my phone's notepad until it becomes a giant wall of text that even I'm terrified to look at. But I do anyway, and then I take all those scenes and begin to organize them into a general chapter by chapter outline. I have to at least know what happens next before I start drafting, or else if I'm staring at a blank page prior to outlining, I literally feel like my brain short circuits and I cannot start writing.
Hmm.
As I said earlier, I do become a pantser partway through when characters do something I don't expect, as they always do, or I come across an unexpected plot hole.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think a lot of us are a combination of those two. I definitely like to have a bit of a plan, but as you say, characters can go off and do their own things, which is always fun, let's be honest. Um, so, what was your biggest challenge that you faced during the writing process, and how did you overcome it?
So, the biggest challenge I faced in the writing process was probably keeping a consistent schedule. I hate to say that I still don't have a consistent schedule between commuting, full time work outside of authoring, working out, and making time for my friends and family. And after all that, sometimes my brain is just too scrambled or fatigued to concentrate. So, as I mentioned earlier, my phone notepad is my best friend to jot down quick notes, and I write whenever I get a free moment. And these quick notes help so that when I sit down in front of my laptop at the end of the day, I can just transcribe my notes to the screen.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that struggles with prioritizing writing. I think we all struggle with that, though, don't we? Finding the time in the day with competing priorities. But I love that you use your phone to take notes. I have been known to ask Google to remind me of things when I'm driving, and it's really just chapter notes, things that just come out of the blue. That's the thing for me. I tend to find I get ideas when I'm doing other things. Um, so thinking back to writing your book, were there any particular chapters or scenes or characters that you found especially difficult or particularly rewarding to write?
So, thinking back, the most rewarding scene I wrote was actually the main couple's first meeting. The first image I ever had of this book was of how they met, and this was even before I knew their names or the plot. The merman was partly in the water, and the human woman was on land, confronting each other for the first time. she was in a defensive stance with one hand held in front of her. And this happens around chapter 5, I believe, in the book. And I was definitely chomping at the bits to write this. The most difficult scenes, surprisingly, were the scenes that took place undersea. I thought it would be easy, considering I am a scuba diver, an avid swimmer and snorkeler. But when it came down to actually writing it out, I had to think about how they would be moving in a weightless, constantly moving environment. And especially for the merfolk, what kind of furniture would they need? How do they sleep? What do they eat? Even little things like how would they write and how would they measure time or distance. Fortunately, my editors were immensely helpful in assisting me with the realism of these particular scenes.
Wow, yeah, I can totally see why that would be challenging. You have to create like the whole world for these characters. It's pretty impressive, I have to say. So, how long did it take you to write the first draft? How did you manage to stay motivated along the way? Because it can be quite tricky in some places, right?
For Ocean Song, it took me about a year to outline and get that initial draft down. It was one of those stories that flowed, and I was just so excited to write it. And then, of course, I was partially motivated by spite because I had just shoved another manuscript after 4 years of querying it. And I felt that Ocean Song could be the one that would become my debut novel.
And you were right. So, congratulations. You talked a bit about getting help from your editor. What role did that feedback play, or any feedback play, in shaping your manuscript? And how did you approach the editing and revision parts?
So this is a great question. I've learned not to take every piece of advice I'm given, whether it's from a beta reader, critique partner, or even industry professionals. I did that with my first manuscript, and it became something unrecognizable.
Hmm.
For Ocean Song, I had a more methodical, purposeful way of going about edits and revisions. It's normal to have an emotional reaction when you first get feedback. I definitely did, but try to sit with it for a while and don't dive in right away. When I got a 3-page edit letter back from my second editor, and this was after the first round of developmental edits, I was so upset because I thought I just did so many revisions on this. How is there so much more? But I read through all the feedback she gave, thought on it, and most importantly, did not do anything with it yet. I gave it a day or two until I could think about the feedback ratio and whether all of it resonated with my book, and then I dove into edits when I felt mentally ready to accept it.
Getting critiques on your work can be really challenging, but I think your approach is so mindful, and I really appreciate those tips. I'm sure everyone listening will as well, because we are always going to get feedback when we put work out into the world. Doesn't make it any easier, but you were really methodical about dealing with that. Um, let's move on to another question. Did you have any surprising discoveries about yourself or your writing during the journey of writing and completing Ocean Song?
So I was surprised by how much I embraced my own real life passions with writing. Growing up in a family and culture that embraced being agreeable and polite and quite traditional, I had a hard time embracing my love for the romance genre, both reading and writing it, as well as injecting real life issues into my stories. With Ocean Song, I went all in on the romance aspect, as well as adding issues like feminism, animal rights, and environmentalism and sustainability, which are all issues I'm passionate about in real life. I wrote Ocean Song the way I wanted to, instead of the way I thought I should. So the product is a story I'm proud of and that I love.
Oh, I love that so much, that you embraced your own passions and brought so much of yourself to writing this book. I think that's really special. Moving on to something that a lot of authors don't enjoy and is not a passion, how have you approached promoting your book? Do you enjoy marketing?
When it comes to promoting my book, listen, I am not a marketer at all. Sometimes we debut authors joke that it feels like throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks, and that's pretty much how it's been.
Hmm.
I talk to other authors about what they're doing for promo, both traditionally and self published authors, and I've learned a ton from them. I promoted a lot the 3 to 4 months before publication, and now I'm doing a steady trickle of post-pub promo. Mostly my goal was to get others to feature me in Ocean Song, so I do a lot of author interviews, Instagram lives, and podcast guesting. I used to hate marketing, but now I'm enjoying it. I love getting my work out there and in front of people, and hoping that Ocean Song finds her readers. Marketing has also given me a newfound love for my work, because it helps me remember all the good things about it, which is especially helpful when imposter syndrome hits.
Yes, that imposter syndrome is real, isn't it, when we're promoting our books? But I love how you've reframed that so that it makes you kind of fall in love with your book again every time you talk about it. I think that's a lovely way to reframe the whole idea of marketing, and a great tip for anyone listening. One thing I really love asking authors is about their writing routine. So, can you tell us what your writing routine is like? And do you have any favorite tools or resources that you can't do without?
So, my writing routine is pretty much me sitting down for an hour or two at the end of the day and hoping I have enough brain power to be creative. I know it's not very helpful. um, Again, as I mentioned earlier, I do have a lot of outside commitments, and then not to mention the commute, the job, the working out, right, the meal prep at home, and then catching up with and helping my mom and grandma and dog with whatever they need. I'm exhausted. So the tool I cannot do without, as I mentioned before, is my phone notepad. Sometimes ideas will come to me during the day, during a slow period at work, or when I'm driving, and I jot them down in my notepad when I get a chance. It allows me then to go home and transcribe my notes into my manuscript without having to think too much. And I write on Microsoft Word and Google Docs. And right now, my go-to resource for writing is The Emotion Thesaurus by Angela Ackerman and Becca Puglisi. It really helps with the whole showing, not telling aspect of writing.
Yes, I love that series. I'm using the Emotional Wound Thesaurus at the moment a lot while I'm outlining my next book. It's such a good help. Really recommend that series as well. Okay, next question. Can you tell us if you could go back and give your pre published self one piece of advice, what would it be?
If I could go back and give my pre-published self a piece of advice, it would be that my time would come. And that goes for everyone who is writing a novel, query, or on their first, second, or third book, or even beyond that. When I was in the query trenches for close to 6 years, I would see other writers getting agented and book deals before me. And while I was happy for them, I would so often wonder, and to quote Ariel from The Little Mermaid, when is it my turn? Now, as a published author, you see people getting bigger and more book deals than you, getting awards and star trade reviews, and more and higher reviews, more attention on social media, a bigger advance, and the list goes on. I would also tell myself that a little bit of envy is normal, and to think of it as this is their time, and my time will come too.
I think that's a piece of advice that we could all do with taking, actually. I think relevant for everybody, that just because somebody else is doing well doesn't mean they're taking something away from you or from your future success. You know, there's room for everybody out there. Really love that. Okay, so Christine, what is next for you as an author? Are you working on a new book, or have you got any other opportunities for Ocean Song that you're working on?
So yeah, what's next for me as an author is that I recently signed for Ocean Song sequel titled Midnight Song, and the first draft is now with my editors for the first round of developmental edits. So that book should be coming toward the end of the year. I am also working on 2 other manuscripts on the side, another romantasy, and also a contemporary romance. I'm also thinking of potentially a third book in Ocean Song universe and possibly some novellas or short story spin-offs, but those are just ideas for now. Other than that, I have some in-person events lined up. Those are Romance in Central New York in Utica, New York in April, an event in the summer that I can't say just yet because I have not been formally announced. So that'll be in Dallas. Villains and Vixens. I'm sorry, that'll be in Orlando. Villains and Vixens in Dallas, Texas in September, and Extravacon in Long Island, New York in November. So if you live in or around those areas, I would love to see you.
Wow, Christine, you have got a lot going on. Lots of different writing projects and events coming up. That's amazing. I will be sure to put the details of those that I can into the show notes so people can come and say hi. Thank you so much for being here today, Christine. Finally, where can people find you and your fantastic book, Ocean Song?
You can find all of my social media links and links to my website, a newsletter sign up, and Goodreads and Storygraph links for Ocean Song and Midnight Song, and buy links for Ocean Song on my Linktree, which is www.linktree.com/CWROSE. My social media handle is at CWRoseAuthor on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook, and at CWRose813 on Twitter, X. And those handles are all one word.
Oh, that's great, Christine. And don't worry if you haven't got pen and paper to hand. I will make sure all of those links are in the show notes, guys. Thank you so much for joining me on Behind the Debut today, Christine. It has been an absolute pleasure chatting, and good luck with all your upcoming projects.
Thank you so much for having me on today, Michelle. I had a ton of fun chatting, and I hope you have a wonderful day ahead.
That's it for this episode of Behind the Debut. If you enjoyed listening today, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing it with a fellow book lover. It really helps new authors get discovered. You can find out more about today's guest, including where to buy their debut book, in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep writing, keep dreaming, and keep turning the page on your own story.